Chapter 31. Risha infiltrates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Once he had settled in his new home, Greyhawk grabbed one of the newly laid mud viper eggs and placed it before him. He then closed his eyes and focused, churning prana throughout his body before focusing it on his stomach. Tertiary nature, Empyrean incubator. His prana covered the mud viper egg in the form of a sphere and gradually solidified into the ovum. Following that, his prana was rapidly sucked into it as the ovum transformed it into the essence of the Empyrean tusk, fusing it into the egg. Empyrean incubator had the property to genetically imbue the essence of an Empyrean tusk in the target entity. Of course, that was easier said than done. 2 hours later, the ovum exploded, causing all the contents within to spill out. Damn! Greyhawk flinched at the explosion, covering his face from the splash. He then swerved his head to stare at a tiny entity that had slammed into the wall. It was tiny, barely the size of his finger. It was a mud viper hatchling but hadn't finished developing fully yet. Moreover, unlike a mud viper hatchling that looked no different from a tiny worm, this one had developed a tiny exoskeletal skull. But it was deformed, cracking all over. Moreover, the tiny tusk growing out of the skull had pierced its body, stabbing its heart. It was dead. Where did it go wrong? He frowned and carefully scooped the hatchling corpse and secured it in a container, labeling it Experiment 1. He then looked around and noted down the environmental condition, his prana condition, the egg's condition, and everything he could remember. I'm genetically alerting it. Of course, it wouldn't be easy. He sighed and began to collate his thoughts. From the failure of the first egg, he realized that this would be a long, arduous process. Too many variables would affect the success. Hence, he would have to map out all the variables and the effects that had on the end result. I need to purchase a bunch of long scrolls. He then expanded his prana and felt around the mud vipers. Good, they have mostly recovered their toxins. Greyhawk collected the toxin in a container from the mud vipers whose venom sacs were full, making an estimate, there's around 800 milliliters. Since I extracted it, their refining efficiency drops by 20 times. But that's fine. This would still net me 40 milliliters of the mud viper tonic. And the number would only increase when he grows more mud vipers. It was best to not bring Inala to his house. Until now, he fooled the latter by making him assume the mud vipers brought to Inala's room were the same. But in truth, he was swapping them with new ones. Inala didn't notice back then because he didn't know I could breed them. But since he saw me selling mud viper eggs, he should be aware of what I'm doing. Bringing the mud vipers to him would be too risky. Instead, he could simply bring the toxin. Besides, with a bigger space, he could grow enough mud vipers and obtain enough mud viper tonic to reach 100 prana in a few months. He could spend the remaining time refining the egg that he could fuse with after reaching the body stage. I should pay Inala a visit now. He probably won't do it for free anymore. Greyhawk thought calmly as he stared around before finalizing, I can provide him with the resources necessary for his work. He would have no choice but to accept the deal. While Greyhawk made his way to the 44th Empyrean tusk's ovaries, another individual had the same thought. But he was making his way towards one of the most guarded regions. There are many elites standing guard here. Risha thought as he hid behind a wall at a curve and peeked. In the channel leading to the Empyrean tusk's heart stood 4 elites. But this was just the entrance. There were multiple chambers within the channel, with the strength of the people stationed within increasing accordingly. At the end of the channel were masters, cultivators at the life stage. Risha sniffed himself, nodding upon failing to notice any scent. He had not only taken a bath and changed his clothes, but he also doused himself with a scent-inhibiting powder that he had prepared. He was currently barefoot, for only then did he have confidence in walking without making any sound. Risha took out a pinch of another powder from his pocket and gently sprinkled it in the air, waiting for a few minutes until he calculated its travel. It should have reached them. He was just about to tread forward when he stopped. His heart thumped as Risha was nervous. No, there's no guarantee. I should wait a bit more. He told himself and waited patiently. He peeked gently, watching the eyes of the four elites slowly droop. It was a sleep-inducing agent and affected someone through their prana. The particles in the powder had an affinity towards prana and were drawn in its direction. Since he had no prana, Risha wasn't affected. He bode his time and waited, watching the eyes of the elites close one after another. Right as the eyes of the fourth elite closed, he tiptoed through the section and walked past them, nervous all the time. In the channels, only the mammoth clansmen could see. Therefore, if any pranic beast were to enter, its only means of traveling would be to transmit prana and rely upon its prana senses. Therefore, as long as they spread their prana around, the moment their prana feels a foreign prana, their skin would prick. That would alert them of an intruder. As they had been at the job for years, they got accustomed to using their prana. It became their habit. Risha took advantage of their refined senses. As he didn't have any prana, he didn't trigger their radar. Moreover, the sleep-inducing agent's effect was short-lived, barely spanning 20 seconds. So, they never felt anything amiss. Huff. He gasped as silently as possible and hid in a tiny protruding. He had gone through this route once in his previous life. And that was during the first great disaster. At that time, when the enemies barged into the channels and made a beeline to the Empyrean Tusk's heart, he chased after them. Eventually, he received the cure. It was the most vivid experience in his life. Hence, even though he had only traveled in this channel once, he could never forget even the tiniest of details here, having planned everything, including rest stops that were away from the eyes of the guard stationed in the channel. I'll get there earlier this time, unnoticed. He thought, moving once he caught his breath. This time, there were too many variables. Hence, he wished to settle things in advance. Risha was heading to the heart. Chapter 32. The Empyrean Tusk's Heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Using the same technique as before, Risha made his way to the last obstacle. Two masters stood guard there. They were at the end of the channel. The channel spread into a massive chamber of bone. In its center was a ginormous heart. But there were no signs of thumping. A biological heart just wasn't powerful enough to pump blood through an Empyrean Tusk's mountainous body. Usually, large creatures had secondary hearts to pump out blood at farther reaches from the heart. But the Empyrean Tusk had only one heart. And it wasn't even that big, just a sphere with 20 meters in diameter. Structurally, it made no sense, for such a small size just wasn't enough. That was only until one thought about the Empyrean Tusk's innate power. Primary nature, internal inertial gravity. The gravity within the heart was so powerful, space bent there, actually storing enough volume of blood to fill up the entire Empyrean Tusk 100 times over. Empyrean Tusks stored vast amounts of resources in their bodies. In terms of water, they had enough in their bodies to fill up a small sea. The water was stored in a compressed space working similar to a storage lantern. The case was the same for food and other resources the Empyrean Tusk consumed. It was because the Empyrean Tusks also treaded regions like the Anuta Plains that were bereft of resources. In such situations, they needed a vast sum of resources to upkeep their functions. Therefore, all storage organs held volumes of resources many times the total volume of the Empyrean Tusk itself. The heart was one such organ, possessing enough nutrient-rich blood to satisfy its energy requirements for a year on its own. Adding on to the various stored resources, it could go for a decade without any external intake. Empyrean Tusks were that much majestic and impressive as living creatures. That's the final obstacle. Risha frowned in worry. The powder he brought wouldn't be effective on someone at the life stage. When a cultivator entered the life stage, they became a special being. In the spirit stage, one cultivated their spirit. In the body stage, they cultivated their body. Similarly, in the life stage, the cultivator cultivated life itself. Depending on their cultivation level at the life stage, a master had multiple lives. Moreover, they could split their bodies into as many copies as the number of lives they possessed. The split bodies weren't clones but were the actual cultivator. If a cultivator at the life stage was killed once, they would lose one life and could continue battling. The problem wasn't with this but with the aspect of their bodies being split. Even though there are two masters here, I cannot guarantee they haven't spread more versions of themselves around the heart. This was the actual problem. Risha used all the prepared powder and waited until it took effect. But just as he was about to go ahead, he noticed another master, a version of the one standing guard. Indeed, there are more of them. Are you sleepy? I just yawned for a moment. With the slightest disturbance, the effects of the powder vanished. Risha couldn't take the risk anymore and he began to retreat. This was supposed to be the safest option. But since it doesn't work, I should enter a capillary and head directly to the heart. As he was a mammoth clansman, the Empyrean tusk would consciously affect the gravity around his body to prevent him from getting crushed by the liquid pressure in the capillary. Usually, there were nodes in the blood vessels to filter out any foreign substances. Oftentimes, during an invasion, a few mammoth clansmen had by mistake fallen into a bloodstream, mostly when the Empyrean tusk was wounded. In such cases, they would arrive at a node and be kept safe there. Eventually, once the invasion ends, the Empyrean tusk would send them into a channel. That was why Risha couldn't jump into a blood vessel. He would be filtered out. There were no nodes this close to the heart. That was why he took the pains to infiltrate this close. He made his way through an intersection channel and sneaked in a certain direction, sighing upon seeing a broken channel. This was broken when the mud vipers invaded during the first minor crisis. Yes, they had almost reached the heart. If the Empyrean tusk hadn't broken the channel, they would have invaded its heart and devoured it whole. The students in the Academy of Refinement weren't the mud vipers' target. Therefore, only a small number of the weakest among their numbers arrived there. The majority of their peak forces were concentrated in the invasion into the channel leading to the heart. A bloody battle had been fought there between the mud vipers and the mammoth clansmen. An Empyrean tusk corpse would provide enough food to a mud viper nest for a century, also proving them surplus prana. Hence, it was a delicacy. Risha extended a ribbon from his cloth towards the broken region of the channel, watching it disintegrate instantly. The gravities messed up. He inhaled a deep breath and gently extended his hand forward, pressing it upon the chaotic gravity-infested area. The Empyrean tusk instinctively suppressed the chaos there, keeping him safe. But since it had voluntarily destroyed the channel, even it felt difficulty in fully calming the gravitational flux. His bones caused crunching sounds as a dozen places cracked in the first second. I can't last long. Gritting his teeth, Risha jumped into the chaotic region, falling out of the channel. His limb bones were crushed into powder, causing them to flail about like rubber appendages. They were given up to ensure his vital organs were safe. The pain was unbearable, even for the regressor. When the Empyrean tusk couldn't fully save him, it focused on keeping him alive, allowing him to plunge into an open blood vessel. That had been torn off when the channel was destroyed. The Empyrean tusk suppressed the blood from spilling out through gravity. Problem was that it was too old by now. As a result, even its body couldn't heal from a simple wound such as this. During the first major disaster, when Risha fights the zingers through this region, he falls in through this cut wound. It remained unhealed until then. But at that point, the Empyrean tusk was in its death throes. It didn't have enough attention to focus on protecting him. Therefore, Risha experienced hell as gravity destroyed his body while his mystic bone art rapidly sucked in prana within the blood vessel, healing him back. It went back and forth, allowing him to barely cling to life. At least, it's not as horrible in this life. Risha thought as he was carried through the blood vessel. Even though he had no prana, his body began to naturally absorb prana from the blood like a sponge. He couldn't activate his mystic bone art to make the prana his. Like the flow of blood, the prana mended his destroyed limbs and the excess simply flowed out. Without any nodes to filter him out, Risha eventually entered the heart, staring at the sea of blood all around him. He swam towards a wall and got into a crease there, taking a meditative pose. Even though it was full of blood, he wasn't affected by the pressure, thanks to the Empyrean tusk's care. Moreover, his body was naturally absorbing all necessary nutrients from blood, including oxygen. He wasn't breathing, but his lungs were constantly replenished with oxygen, allowing him to survive in such an environment. Now, I need to meditate and succeed. Risha's eyes were cold, focused. A few more years remain of your lifespan. In this life, I'll prevent your premature death. The only death you'll experience is one of old age. Chapter 33. Portrait Popularity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Where's he going now? Inala paused his work for a moment upon seeing Inala follow after Latrina. He didn't know Latrina's real identity. All he judged based on her attire was that she hailed from an affluent family. He didn't have any means to gather info on people outside his settlement. Did Virala get access to information about people from Granny Oyo? Granny Oyo also sold medicine to other settlements. Therefore, she maintained an account book about her customers. If Virala somehow chanced upon it, he might use it to further his agenda. Indeed, all he's selling is some medicine. With the support he's getting, he wouldn't even need the Paruta gain from selling here. His true objective should be to network with affluent students. Inala concluded. Does that mean he too would network with the students? Yes. That was why he was making portraits of everyone. But would he target those focused upon by Virala? If the chance presents itself, then yes. Greha, Yenda, and Risha had already left the fair. That left only Virala and Inala here. After some time passed, Inala was unable to notice the presence of Virala too. Same for Latrina. Did the two of them go somewhere together? Virala was great at wooing women. Inala was aware of that fact. Therefore, he wondered if Virala intended to take a harem route, but the Mammoth clan women aren't the type to share their beloved with another. He'll be stabbed in the back at this rate. I can use it against him. But first, I need to gather evidence. Thinking as such, Inala resumed his work, making portraits of the students. Can you make one with us together? Two elites that intended to return to their settlement had exited the middle ring and arrived at the outer ring. They then noticed the most crowded stall in the outer ring and approached it to witness what was up with it. Inala was aware that the rest of the reincarnates would only be selling a product. Therefore, they'll finish up the selling process quickly and would return home to collate their gains. That meant only Inala would be left behind until the evening. The elites and even the masters would be leaving by the outer ring to return to their settlement. By then, most of the stalls in the outer ring would be empty, save for him. As most of the crowd would surround his stall, the elites and even the masters would be curious. That was his goal all along. And once it was evening time, his first elite customers arrived. Inala observed the two elites that seemed to be a couple and asked, "Do you want a couple's portrait? Can you fit two people in that tiny portrait?" The female elite asked. "Yes, but can you two hug each other?" Inala asked, smiling upon seeing them nod as he adjusted their hugging pose. "This is embarrassing." The male elite blushed upon hugging his wife in public. Public display of affection wasn't a thing in the Mammoth clan. Inala was aware of it, and hence, he hurried the production. He finished the major sketch lines and prompted them to relax. "You can stop hugging. I have what I need to finish." Since the pose was done, he only needed to fill in the details. That could be inferred individually. An hour later, he finished two portraits, giving one to each of the couple. "How is it?" Amazing." The female elite blushed as she inspected the portrait. She felt the inscription of her and her husband in the portrait, observing their loving pose in a daze. I'll treasure it. Death was everywhere in Sumatra. This portrait might not mean much in terms of practical value. But it created a memory of each other that would last even if one of them might die in the future. They could remember their beloved through their portrait, living vicariously in the memory of their past. Thank you. The male elite made a curt bow toward Inala. He had only graduated a few months ago. He was a newbie elite and hence didn't have the arrogance elites usually had. This also meant he was nervous. For, elites died all the time, in charge of most of the Empyrean Tusk's safety. If he died, he didn't wish his beloved to forget him. This portrait will serve as a reminder and keep her memory of him fresh. His wife too felt the same. Moreover, the portrait was only palm-sized. Hence, it could be carried on their body. They could tie it to a thread and sling it around their neck or harness it to their hip. By carrying it on their being, they would remember their family and would fight with a stronger intent to survive and make it back home alive. I can make portraits and even sculptures. Inala advertised himself upon seeing many elites eyeing his stall. Whether it be the compact portraits you can carry with you or life-sized versions for your homes, I can make them in the shortest possible time. If you pay a premium, I can even make the portraits using clay that is as hard as our bones. The last part was just a boast, but it did garner him plenty of attention. Many elites began to commission him, and soon, he ran out of materials. There were still plenty of customers waiting. Smiling wryly, Inala expressed his apology. I'm sorry, but all the materials I prepared have run out. I can only resume making the portraits tomorrow. Please visit the 44th Settlement's Academy of Refinement and ask for my service. My name's Inala. Only instructors can enter the academy, right? It's not appropriate for us to barge into such a place. He's still a student. If he was an elite, he could visit our settlements to take up work. What's the 44th settlement doing? Just assign this student a home to work on his craft. Don't they have plenty of vacant homes? The elites complained one after another. It wasn't easy to enter another settlement. A lot had to be coordinated beforehand to make two Empyrean tusks move beside each other before the elites from one settlement could jump into the other. Originally, Inala's work wasn't deemed important for the settlement's future. So, none of the instructors promoted his exhibit to the middle ring. Moreover, the exhibit praised by Instructor Mandul was Inala's comedy troupe. Therefore, when he didn't see it, Instructor Mandul was disappointed and hence didn't support Inala's actions. Inala advertised one but sold something else. It offended him. That was why he didn't support Inala's stall. But now that dozens of elites pressured him, Instructor Mandul was forced to act and promote Inala's exhibit and permit him to form a business. I succeeded in the end. Inala became relieved upon seeing an irritated Instructor Mandul give him the green light. Chapter 34. Virala's Grand Scheme. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ha, Virala, stop, go slower. Latrina panted as she joined bodies with Virala at a stall in the corner. A shutter had been pulled up as a barricade to prevent them from being heard by the others. Moreover, they chose a time when all the crowd in the outer ring had converged around Inala's stall. That meant there wasn't anyone nearby that could overhear them. It worked to their advantage. Or rather, everything was calculated by Virala until the most minute of variables. And soon, he climaxed, arg. Wait. Latrina shrieked in shock, not inside. Shit. It was too late. The deed was done. Latrina moved away from Virala and fingered her groin, intending to take out the semen. But strangely, she didn't even feel a drop. No way, did it go too deep. But I don't think it should be like this. Sex education wasn't a thing part of their curriculum. But that didn't mean she was unaware of what happened between a couple in the bedroom. She was only a couple of months away from graduating from the academy. That meant she was about to be considered an adult by the Mammoth clan. Her mother had given her a bone slip, granting her all the necessary knowledge on the subject matter. Therefore, Latrina knew that semen would leak out if she used her fingers in a certain way. He wasn't even long enough to reach my uterus. It was too good. Virala suddenly hugged her, causing her heart rate to accelerate. She didn't even realize she had been manipulated using an aphrodisiac, influencing her decision-making. It indeed was good enough to lose my mind. Latrina sighed before firming her thoughts. Fine, so be it. I'll bear a child. I'll become an adult soon enough anyway. I can handle childbirth. Here, drink this. Virala suddenly forced a vial down her throat. Still under the influence of the aphrodisiac and due to the events that transpired before, Latrina habitually opened her mouth and glugged the contents. Her eyes widened as she stared at him in alertness. What did you make me drink? It's a medicine that prevents you from getting pregnant, Virala said, coughing out blood when he was slapped in the face. You, bastard. Latrina fumed as prana burst out of her in anger. How dare you? The Mammoth clan's death rate was tremendous. Unless one became a master, they had a significant chance of dying anytime. The only way to combat this was by having a birth rate vastly superior as compared to their death rate. Therefore, the act of childbirth was considered sacred. Whether it be through a mistake or not, if a child begins to form, they won't do anything to hamper its birth. After all, any Mammoth clansman had at least a dozen children or even more during her lifetime. Having been alive for more than a century, Granny Oyo had 14 children in total. Her grandchildren were too numerous to count. Of course, a good portion of them died in the first minor crisis. No Mammoth clansman ever avoided childbirth. Therefore, when Latrina heard Virala's words, all her attraction towards him vanished, instead replaced by hatred. Fucking trash. I'm still a student. Virala shouted suddenly, please wait until I become an elite. We can properly have children after that. Is that so? Latrina didn't even pay any heed to his words. Pathetic. With that, she never glanced in his direction and walked away, making her way to her settlement. Virala intended to chase after her, but upon sensing the killing intent emanating from her, he backed away. He remained in the stall, infusing prana into his cracked jaw. Such brute strength. She didn't hold back in the slightest with that slap. As expected of the 43rd settlement leader's daughter. Even if she's just one of his many daughters, the resources she received are no joke. That's why even her body is so strong. Once he finished healing his injury, Virala stretched his limbs lightly. Ah, that felt good. His lips curled up into a smile as he slowly ripped apart a thin filament from his dongar, transparent in nature, barely a tenth of a hair's thickness. It was a condom he had created just for this purpose. That was why when Latrina tried to take out the semen from her organ, she didn't find any. Contraceptives weren't a thing here. Therefore, it didn't even cross her mind that something like that existed. Hence, she was fooled. As for the vial she was forced to drink, it had a hidden purpose. I look forward to tomorrow. His grin widened as Virala stepped out of the stall and looked towards the trunk of the 43rd Empyrean tusk, seeing Latrina tread it up. Latrina, my pawn, return to your home. As the settlement leader's daughter, you'll be protected. But, you'll also be your settlement's demise. As Latrina returned to her settlement, she began to sweat a little due to the exertion. Her sweat evaporated and wafted out. As the sweat particles moved in the air, they seemed to have an affinity towards the buildings, latching onto them. These particles released a faint scent, akin to a pheromone. It was faint and couldn't be smelled by the human nose. But, it was fatal for a certain species. This scent wouldn't dissipate and instead remain on the buildings. The effects would last for a year, as that was how it was created. Moreover, more and more scent particles would waft out of Latrina faintly through sweat. The contents of the vial she swallowed would make her body react to produce sweat continuously, but at a rate she wouldn't notice. Moreover, it had fused with her prana, constantly being created as her prana regenerated. Therefore, Latrina was pretty much a generator of the scent. She lived in a building on the 33rd Empyrean Tusk's head. Therefore, when the Empyrean Tusk moved, it caused wind to blow from its head to its tail. Meaning, this wind carried the scent she exuded throughout the settlement, causing it to latch onto all the buildings. Only a zinger would smell it, Latrina. No one else can. But, Virala laughed, it has been a century since the Mammoth clan last passed through the Dieng Canyon. Zingers are only iron-grade pranic beasts, weak. The Mammoth clan cultivators that could transform into a zinger had already died. Zingers weren't strong individually. The Mammoth clansmen that could become a zinger were already few, to begin with. But over the century, they all died out in the battles. As a result, when the Mammoth clan ventured into the Dieng Canyon without any zinger among them to guide them, they suffered immensely. Virala recalled the relevant excerpt from Sumatra Chronicles, "No one will know. And by the time anyone becomes a zinger, it would be too late. The scent would cover both the 43rd and 44th settlements by then. The path to a cure is just one," he muttered, "but that's only in terms of an available path. But he muttered arrogantly as he walked up the 44th Empyrean Tusk's trunk confidently, "I'm different. I'll open up a new path." Chapter 35. Imagination Art. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I'm angry. Damn it. Latrina growled as she walked past the stalls one after another. "Excuse me." Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to her, causing her to turn around and stare in the direction of the voice. She immediately knew who the caller was. He's the student that makes the portraits. His name. Inala, right? Latrina stared at her caller in confusion. "Do you have something to do with me?" "Ah, yes." Inala smiled wryly and asked, "You're someone affluent, right? Why are you asking that?" Latrina frowned. She was already in a bad mood, so she felt like she might snap at him if he talked to her anymore. "I notice that you're in a bad mood. I don't mean to overstep my boundary, but if you wish to take a breather and relax, I can help with that. I can make portraits that calm you at a glance." He spoke. "I'm not in the mood." Latrina huffed, about to walk away. "Don't bother me. You're on the verge of a collapse." Inala's voice turned serious. "Your emotional state is very strained at present. With the slightest nudge, your spirit containers might break. At least 20 prana might leak out as a result. You." Latrina was stunned. She intended to snap at him, but the cultivator's instinct drilled into her since young made her think for a moment. If what Inala said was right, she might lose 20 prana. That was dangerous. Even for her, losing that much would imply she wasn't good at controlling her emotions. Her father's already low attention on her might completely vanish after that. She was irritated upon being denied a child of her own. That affected her tremendously, especially since births were treated as sacred. Even though it was because of Virala's actions, it was in her body that a childbirth had been denied. That was taking a mental toll on her. She glared at Inala. "I'm the 43rd settlement leader's daughter, Latrina. I'm not weak enough that a minor emotional fluctuation would cause my spirit containers to. I have the fragment disease." Inala made eye contact, sporting a solemn expression as he said, observing her flinch in surprise at his reveal. "At the slightest change in my emotional state, my spirit container shatters. I have gone through the process enough times to recognize it with a glance. You're at that state presently. Thanks to my disease, I believe I have the expertise to comment on your condition." "Fragment disease," she muttered, calming down. She took in deep breaths and circulated the mystic bone art, gradually clearing out her thoughts. She had a friend that had the fragment disease. When he graduated and proved useless to the clan, he was tossed into a pranic beast's mouth. She had personally witnessed the sight. By emitting her prana, she sensed the faint cracks in his body, verifying that he indeed had the disease. Therefore, she knew the weight behind Inala's statement. "Thank you, I have calmed down enough," she said after a couple of minutes had passed, "but I apologize. I don't need any help. I can naturally control my emotions." "I'm glad you're able to do so," Inala broke into a smile. "As a death row student, I'm always desperate to make myself useful to the clan. And when I saw your condition, I knew I had to alert you about it. Moreover, you paid me 20 paruta. So, you're an important customer of mine." He grinned, behaving like a novice, penny-pincher merchant. His intentions were clear. By helping her now, he was hoping for more business from her in the future. As he didn't even display a shred of cunning, Latrina only amounted to his child's play scheme as being cute. "Haha." Latrina chuckled and extended her hand for a shake. "Inala, right. Can you make larger portraits?" "I can," Inala patted his chest, "there's no limit to the size. As big as you want, I can make it, whether it be a portrait or a sculpture, from one person to your entire family. I can do them all. Also," that he sported a smug expression, "I can also make imagination art." "Imagination art?" Latrina tilted her head in confusion. "What's that? What if you were born a male?" "I can draw a realistic version of that." He continued, "I can draw a scene of you fighting against a mud viper, I can make it as if you're raiding a mud viper nest, and so on. Or I can make emotional portraits of yourself or anyone of your choosing. Whether it be an intense display of anger, sadness, or happiness, I can make a vivid display." He pointed at her. "Just now, you were angry. I can make an art of something that at a glance would make you angry, very angry. What's the use of?" Latrina trailed off, webbed by his explanation. "Training, what else?" Inala grinned. "Every time your emotion is affected, you can use the mystic bone art to calm yourself. That'll serve as valuable training to control your emotions. For all sorts of emotions you can ever experience, I can make you feel them through my art. In a controlled and safe environment, you can practice enduring them without causing a loss in your prana. I don't need to explain further, right? Now I understand why you asked if I was affluent." Latrina nodded and stared at him, calm. "These imagination art, would be expensive, right?" "Yes, since they need to be detailed and explosive enough to evoke the related emotion in you. It'll take time to make." Inala replied, "But in terms of use, either you alone can use it or you can sell it to your settlement's Academy of Refinement for the benefit of all students. You want money in exchange for it, right?" Latrina turned silent, saying after a while, "Give me 2 days to think it through. And please prepare a piece of imagination art as a sample. If it's as effective as you proclaim, I'll use my funds to support you." "Thank you for giving me a chance," Inala bowed respectively. "I won't waste your valuable time anymore. Please head back safely." "All right," Latrina smiled and turned around, intending to return home. She stopped all of a sudden and glanced at him. "You're from the 44th settlement?" "Yes, I am." Inala nodded, relieved. Finally, she asked the question. "Now I'll be able to probe what Virala did to her." "It took enough time, ah. Do you know someone named Virala?" she asked. "Oh, I know him very well." Inala spoke with great familiarity. "The two of us share the same fate. We're both death row students." Chapter 36. Worthy of living. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Death row student. Latrina muttered, feeling suspicious of Virala. "How did I fall for someone like that? What's he like?" she asked next. Inala made it seem like he was pondering carefully and spoke slowly. "He's cunningly smart, has a way with words, and always plans a few moves ahead. He's someone I both respect and dislike." Everything he said was what he honestly felt about Virala. It was best to be as honest as possible, only then would he be able to probe Latrina and glean into Virala's plans. He then stared at her. Why are you asking about him? Did he do something to you? It's nothing. Latrina sighed softly. By chance. Inala focused on her eyes, acting like he could see through her as he spoke, softly. Do you like him? None of your business, Latrina snorted and turned around, walking away. If you're thinking of falling in love with him, I advise against it, since you're a valuable customer of mine. He raised his voice slightly. He already has a lover. Lover. Latrina stopped suddenly. For an instant, her prana flared up, causing her hair to flail about like it experienced a shockwave. Veins popped all over her eyes as she glared at Inala. Are you telling the truth? Yup, Inala acted like he was oblivious to her emotional state and waved his hand calmly. Any student from the 44th settlement would know. He's sweethearts with Rava, one of Granny Oyo's granddaughters. It was because of this that he was accepted as her disciple and taught medicine. He was selling medicine at a stall here with her. That girl with him. Latrina recalled the girl beside Virala at his stall. All he told me was that the two of them had a decent friendship. Is that so? Latrina waved her hand and walked away, exiting the outer ring as she climbed the 43rd Empyrean Tusk's trunk and calmly scaled up. Her eyes were calm, cold even, staring at her surroundings as if everything was but dust. Okay, I did my part here. Inala exhaled softly. It didn't matter if Latrina commissioned him for the imagination art he boasted to her about. Plenty of elites would knock on his door for a portrait anyway. He could gradually tell them about imagination art and increase his sales. Besides, his goal was only to earn enough paruta to hit 100 prana. Once he reaches the body stage, he would be able to prepare and sell items vastly more expensive than the portraits. So, this art fiasco was only until the first major disaster began. Therefore, his primary goal in approaching Latrina was to instigate her against him. It's not possible to interrogate her about whatever she had with Virala. But, I hope by instigating her like this, I can use her to hinder his growth. That was his only goal. Of course, he would love it if Latrina gave her all in destroying Virala. A borrowed sword with a fatally sharp edge was the best for destroying an enemy. Inala packed his stall, watching the crowd leave the hilltop one after another. The elites broke down the walls into smaller segments and began to transport them back to their respective settlements. Let's return. You're last. Instructor Mando approached him, having just returned after guiding the students to the settlement. Inala accompanied Instructor Mando as they slowly began to climb the trunk, watching the elites carry the items, from the hilltop, past them. Kararf Roth right as Inala arrived on the head, the 44th Empyrean Tusk lifted its trunk high up in the air and unleashed a powerful trumpet, thunderously deafening. Shit! He used his palms to apply pressure on his ears, shouting as he felt like he had gone deaf from the sound. His body rattled, even though all that reached him were mere residuals from the sound waves. As the Empyrean Tusk pointed the nostrils of its trunk away from the settlement, most of the trumpeting sound moved away from them. A blast of shock waves, powerful enough that he could see a densely compressed wave of air blast outwards in a semi-circular arc BDNV. It was powerful enough to flatten a hill, even though it wasn't even an attack. The shockwave traveled for more than 100 kilometers, entering the Dieng Canyon. There was a stirrup in the canyon as a jet-black cloud flitted about in response. Amazing, right? Instructor Mando muttered with unbridled pride, only our mammoth clan has such a terrifying home. That's why even massive empires don't dare mess with us. His eyes shone with contempt. 50 years ago, when I was a student, a king offended us. He uttered with a bone-chilling coldness, that day, 44 Empyrean Tusks stomped that foolish king's kingdom into oblivion. An entire civilization was wiped out from the map just like that. He patted Inala, slightly applying force. If you wish to be part of our mammoth clan's legendary legacy, prove your worth and live past your deadline. I know, Instructor Mandu. Inala nodded, that's why I'm giving it my all. You sure? Instructor Mandu snorted, didn't you show me something else yesterday? Why did you not display that exhibit? Actually. Inala whispered in his ear, shocking him with the truth, a master witnessed it after that and improved my skill to a terrifying level. They told me to avoid using it to earn Paruta, since it had combat potential. That's why I had to drop it. A master. Instructor Mandu's negative impression of Inala vanished. Upon staring at the latter's excited eyes, he knew Inala spoke the truth. Congratulations on getting a master's grace. That's a reward in of itself. Thank you, instructor. Inala bowed in joy, I'm sure it was because you spread the word. That. Instructor Mandu smiled wryly, I didn't do anything. He then patted Inala, coughing to speak, keep working hard. We'll now proceed to select a house. Once it's done, I'll have to send the address to the elites that will request your service later. I have one in mind. Inala smiled contentedly and obtained the house he wanted. It was a cheap house, located close to the Empyrean Tusk's tail. It was the farthest house located in the settlement, never occupied because of the stench that pervaded the region. It was situated alarmingly close to the butthole, after all. Moreover, every time the tail flapped around, it produced thunderous sounds. The environment would disrupt one's meditation. The previous homeowners vacated it when they lost a lot of prana due to the disturbance. Are you sure this is what you want? Instructor Mandu face palmed, you have hundreds of better options, especially since half the homes are vacant. And this is the one you want. Instructor, Inala spoke in seriousness, I'm a death row student suffering from the fragment disease. Do I have a future? No, Instructor Mandu shook his head. That's why, Inala stared at his home, I'll challenge myself in this home. Just by surviving in such a condition where others gave up would mean. He grinned, I'm worthy of living. Chapter 37. Inala/Greha You are listening at novelfull.audio. Seriously. This house. Greha panted as he covered his ears due to the slapping of the Empyrean Tusk's tail and stared into Inala's new home. He looked around, observing that no one else lived in the vicinity. This region was uninhabited in the first place. And with the settlement losing half its population recently, the area around the 44th Empyrean Tusk's buttocks was a ghost town. I'm surprised you figured out my address this quickly, Inala expressed his praise, you must be desperate for my assistance, huh? Greha didn't comment about that. Instead, he stared at Inala in all seriousness, asking with a mildly dejected tone, are you sure about this? Your goal is the Zinger Queen. Inala's eyes widened subtly at his statement. Greha didn't let it slip past his notice, sighing in disappointment as a result, so, I guessed it right. Why? He focused all his attention on Inala's face, observing his every minor change in facial expression. The Zinger Queen is only an expert iron-grade pranic beast. No mammoth clansman that ever fuses with an iron-grade pranic beast will be allocated enough resources to become a master. You have no future, especially without a cure. He glared at Inala, you wouldn't even survive until the second major disaster. What about you, then? Inala snorted, your goal is to become a mud viper. That's merely a beginner iron-grade pranic beast, the lowest of the low. Greha was stunned by his words, staring at Inala in shock, how? Come in first. Inala motioned to his living room, we'll talk inside. Even if this place is a ghost town, there might still be ears around. His mood serious, Greha entered the house and closed the door, taking a seat in the living room. He looked around, unable to notice any of Inala's belongings there, everything here is from the previous owner. Inala's current home was special. During the first major disaster, this was where the egg with the Zinger Queen would be laid. The fact that Inala picked it meant he intended to become a Zinger Queen. That's impossible, Greha expressed his confusion, a male mammoth clansman can only fuse with a male pranic beast egg. The gender rule cannot be violated. If you still force your way through, you'll explode. I have plans regarding that. Inala smiled calmly. Do you think it will work? Greha snorted, stop being delusional. Just because you think it'll work doesn't mean. Oh, it'll work. Inala patted his chest, I'm not basing it on some hypothesis. It has been proven in Sumatra chronicles. Impossible, Greha shook his head, if something like that could be done, I would have noticed. Are you sure about that? Inala stared at Greha with a sense of arrogance, just like me, you might have read the book multiple times. But, can you recall every single line from it? Moreover, do you understand every single sentence? I don't, Inala said, I only remember the parts that have given me a vivid impression. Only the lines related to it are crystal clear in my memory. As for the rest, I only remember the story, character, and the general meaning and intent behind the dialogues to the scenes. Aren't you the same? He continued, didn't you base your plan on certain paragraphs that confirm your theories? I get what you're saying, Greha sighed in defeat and asked, so, somewhere in Sumatra chronicles, your method has been confirmed. Yup, it was just a one-liner though. Inala said, and it was said in passing. Whether it be the chapter comments or even the paragraph comments to the paragraph with that line, not a single reader commented about it. There was no weight given to it because the event accompanying that statement carried a significant impact. Everyone focused on that. Greha was silent. The moment the creature resembling Cthulhu brought him to that mysterious space, he realized Sumatra Chronicles wasn't merely a story. It was an account of reality being written by a deity. That was why the novel was that damn interesting. Moreover, it had so many secrets buried within it. The entire novel was a treasure trove of secrets. The greater one researched upon it and pondered the various sentences forming it, the more underlying rules of Sumatra continent would they unearth. If only I could refer to the book whenever I want. I feel the same, Inala sighed, I have the thought almost all the time. So, what's our plan? Greha spoke after a couple of minutes of silence, are you giving up on the cure? We realize Empyrean Tusk's heart is the cure, but in truth, it could also be interpreted otherwise. Inala said, fragment disease isn't a disease but a condition due to having a stronger Empyrean Tusk's characteristic. We're closer to the Empyrean Tusk in terms of our body's constitution, a lot more than the other mammoth clansmen. Greha's eyes widened in surprise as realization finally dawned on him, I see, so that's what she meant. She. Inala caught onto his expression and pressed forth, what do you mean by that, Greha? It's nothing. Greha got up, intending to leave. Take a seat, Inala's voice dropped in tone, expressing killing intent, do you think I was sharing information with you for free? He calmly patted the sofa, sit. Greha glared at Inala while the latter did the same. The two remained in a staring contest for 10 whole minutes, allowing him to realize, Inala is serious this time. If I don't cooperate, I wouldn't be walking out of this house unscathed. There would be a fight to the death. Greha observed his surroundings with more attention this time, noticing pieces of bone subtly placed all around him, mostly hidden, spirit weapons. My goodness! How many has this madman refined? The entire house was one major trap, that was why he lured me in by goading me with sensitive information. I walked right into his trap. It's good that you realized, Inala spoke calmly, I purposely left a few in the open to make you aware. Now, take a seat, Greha. The night's long, and before we enter Dieng Canyon, I intend to discuss with you, heart to heart. Inala expressed his resolution, believe me when I say I truly intend to exchange information with you. I have observed everyone for the past month. And I can say that you're also treading a route similar to mine. Our interests are aligned and wouldn't conflict for at least a year. He concluded, hence, I believe we both can benefit from this deal. We each have valuable information. Let's exchange it. Fine. Greha sighed and took a seat. It was his fault to have let his guard down. Unless Inala was satisfied, he couldn't leave the house. In his possession was a bucket with the mud viper toxin. Other than that, he only had one spirit weapon in his pocket. In contrast, Inala had as many as he wanted, placed strategically throughout the living room. If a fight were to erupt, Greha would die, irrespective of how much prana he had. Inala's fully prepared and enjoys home-ground advantage here. I was 2na.ve. Since I had been visiting his house daily over the past month, I forgot that we're not in the academy anymore. There's no protection from the instructors here. Greha stared at Inala, eventually revealing the secret that he had blurted out by mistake before. I spoke to our Empyrean Tusk today. Chapter 38. Planning for the endgame. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, the Empyrean Tusk addressed you as her son. Inala nodded in understanding, conveying his conjecture on the matter. That is in line with my thoughts. You could guess it. Greha was stunned, staring at Inala in a new light. He's terrifying. How did I underplay his fearsome intuitive prowess in my estimation before? Shit, my lack of scheming capabilities is being shown here. Remember when Risha became an Empyrean Tusk, Inala said, recall our requirements to successfully enter and cultivate in the body stage. Once we build 100 spirit containers and fill them all with prana, we'll reach the peak of the spirit stage. Once we fuse all 100 spirit containers into one, we'll enter the body stage. But, this spirit container is unstable and cannot last for more than a few minutes. Greha spoke, therefore, to stabilize it, we fuse it with the egg of a pranic beast. Wait a second. Greha shouted in shock, there wasn't an Empyrean Tusk egg there for him to fuse with. Yes, Inala nodded, egging Greha to continue his thoughts. I originally thought an Empyrean Tusk's heart doubled as its egg. Greha frowned, since in Sumatra chronicles, details about their birth were never stated. There also were no hints of a male Empyrean Tusk mentioned until the end. I assumed they were asexual creatures. There are many pranic beasts like that. Their heart doubles down as an egg. And when the parent dies, the heart becomes an egg and hatches a newborn. That was why I thought it made sense when Risha entered the 44th Empyrean Tusk's heart during her death and gained her power. Usually, that's the case. Inala nodded, but Risha never fused with a pranic beast egg back then. Instead, Inala patted his thigh. He absorbed enough of the Empyrean Tusk's blood to awaken the bloodline in him. It was mentioned thrice in Sumatra chronicles as a monologue from Risha, Inala said, not once was it confirmed though. But, I believe that is the truth, especially considering how he could transform to varying levels at the body stage and fight. That. Greha felt the last pieces of the puzzle in his mind fit right in. Indeed, it's not the case of his genius capabilities in prana manipulation that he could control his level of transformation. A cultivator in the body stage could transform into the pranic beast they fused with. A cultivator that had fused with a mud viper would transform into the mud viper wholly. They would look no different from a regular mud viper. This was always the case. But, Risha was able to control his transformation and split it up into 4 stages. Tusk, exoskeleton, miniature, and Empyrean. At the tusk stage, he could create and wield a tusk as a weapon. He held the tusk in his hand like a tool. At the exoskeleton stage, an exoskeleton armor similar to the one on the Empyrean tusk covered his body. But he would remain humanoid, the same size as his usual self. At the miniature stage, he transformed into a 4-meter tall Empyrean tusk. Only at the Empyrean stage did he truly become an Empyrean tusk in all its glory, standing at a height exceeding a kilometer. Stages 1 to 3 didn't exist for any other cultivator. They directly transformed into the full form of their respective pranic beast. Originally, if treated like a novel, this characteristic of Risha seemed something reserved for the main character just to be unique. But the moment Sumatra Chronicles was revealed to be real, that changed everything. It meant there was a concrete reason for its existence. You know that a mammoth clansman suffers from the fragment disease because the Empyrean Tusk's bloodline is highly concentrated in them, right? Inala concluded, you know until this part. Then, do you remember the filler arc in Sumatra Chronicles about the Kudur clan? I disliked it, so I skipped most of the contents. Greha smiled wryly. That arc was damn boring. I did that too, so I understand your opinion. Inala nodded, but I heard from someone on the forum that it explained the logic behind Risha's uniqueness. So, I gritted through the arc. There, I noticed some familiarity. Like us, the Kudur clan live on the back of a pranic beast, the Empyrean snapper. Rare Kudur clansmen suffer from the buoyant disease. But in situations where they ingest large quantities of the Empyrean snapper's blood, they awaken their bloodline and can transform into an Empyrean Kudur themselves. But this only happens when they ingest the blood while fusing their 100 spirit containers into one. Inala raised a finger. There was one example in that arc. He was someone as strong as Risha. But due to the Kudur clan's carefree nature, he was never relevant to the plot. Inala concluded, so, Risha never had to consume our Empyrean Tusk's heart to gain its power. Rather, to awaken our bloodline, we only need to ingest large quantities of the Empyrean Tusk's blood during the process when we fuse our spirit containers into one. That's the actual cure to the fragment disease. Greha sat in silence, too stunned to speak. As he pondered Inala's words and recalled his experience with the Empyrean Tusk, he felt things made sense. That means the cure is accessible. I see, so that's why I was given the ovum. Through it, I can awaken my bloodline and become an Empyrean Tusk. All I require is enough prana to facilitate the process. But... He frowned, recalling his first thought upon noticing Inala's choice of home. He stared in confusion, if you can become an Empyrean Tusk, why would you choose anything else? An expert gold-grade pranic beast, the top of the top, with a lifespan of around 2,000 years. That's the Empyrean Tusk. No other pranic beast can ever come close. That's true, Inala nodded, if I awaken my bloodline, would be similar to Risha and can activate my power in 4 stages, just like him. I'll be alive for long enough to become bored of life. But, he stared at Greha in mockery, Risha had all that. Then, what was his age when he died? Greha turned silent. He was 119 years old. That's how long he remained alive before getting killed by the Boar King. Inala shrugged, what's the use in being able to remain alive for thousands of years when you are killed before being able to live even a tenth of that lifespan? He mocked Greha, can you kill the Boar King? Even Risha died a dog's death against him. Aren't we all preparing to survive the 4th major disaster and prevent the Mammoth clan's annihilation under the hands of the Boar King? Inala growled, getting the cure is merely the first step. Being an Empyrean Tusk wouldn't make me stronger than Risha. That path would only guarantee my death against the Boar King. Can a zinger do anything? Greha snorted, retaliating with his argument, a zinger can spend its lifetime attacking an Empyrean Tusk and still fail to make a scratch. Do you think such a weak pranic beast can manage to harm a single strand of the Boar King's hair, not to mention kill him? Not in a year, no. Inala shook his head before grinning, but by the time we encounter the Boar King. Yes. Chapter 39. Cthulhu's Excitement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I understand your plan better now. Greha nodded. I told you pretty much everything, Inala pointed at Greha, it's time you reveal your plans too. There's a reason you've chosen the Mud Vipers, right? Fine, after a moment of thought, Greha stared at Inala, but, do you understand the implications if I were to show you my plan? By revealing our plans to each other, we're placing our weakness in each other's hands, Greha said. I know that, Inala stared at him calmly, isn't that why I told you my plan already? Stop wasting my time and out with it. I understand. Greha was able to glean better into Inala's nature. He has probed enough that he's aware he could gain tremendously from me through this transaction. That's why he has revealed his plans without hesitation. Wait. He shuddered upon thinking of their first interaction. It was Inala that shouted to get Greha's help in closing the entrance to the Academy's shelter during the first minor crisis. It was from there that their partnership began. He already had a grasp of my character to bet on me. And in the name of a transaction, he refined Mud Viper tonic for free for a month. That transaction was due to Greha giving Inala a Mud Viper. But after the transfer, Greha had no way to ask Inala to uphold his end of the deal. They hadn't notarized the deal after all. Moreover, Inala gained nothing from refining Mud Viper tonic for him daily. Instead, he expended his prana to do so. There was no benefit in keeping up his end of the deal, since if he holed himself in his room, it would be a blow to Greha. Without the Mud Viper tonic, Greha wouldn't have been able to raise the Mud Viper eggs, train, or do anything worthwhile. That one move would have crippled all his plans. But despite everything, Inala refined Mud Viper tonic for him daily, without shirking away from his responsibility even once. He always complained but never acted against him. Leading to the current event, Greha was terrified of this individual named Inala. Did he show his goodwill just to lay the groundwork for today? The groundwork began the moment Inala called out for Greha's help. And by showing his favor during the past month, Inala indeed built a positive image of himself in Greha's mind. If not for that, Greha wouldn't have been willing to disclose his secrets. Since when? Greha stared at Inala and asked, "How did you know that I would come to possess a valuable secret and would be willing to share it with you?" "I'll tell you after you reveal your secret." Inala smiled. "Alright," Greha brought out the ovum and spoke, "this was my target from the start. When I touched it, the Empyrean tusk was able to converse with me. She called me her son, despite knowing everything about me. Tertiary nature, Empyrean incubator. To the Empyrean tusk, we mammoth clansmen are like a bone slip. All information about us is available for the Empyrean tusk to access. So, she already knows of us hailing from Earth and whatever we set out to do." Greha said, "But what was puzzling was that she used her powers to fuse this ovum to me and made it my tertiary nature." "Tertiary nature," Inala nodded, "that's terrifying. Even Risha only gained it at the endgame." Greha then explained about his tertiary nature. "I plan to use the Empyrean incubator to infuse the Empyrean tusk's essence into a Mud Viper egg and create a mutant egg. Once it mutates, the egg would at least be at the silver grade. Mud Vipers might be iron grade pranic beast. But when they fuse with the powers of a gold grade pranic beast, the result would at least be a silver grade pranic beast. I plan to refine as many successful eggs as possible. By collating the data, I'll do my best to increase the result as high as possible in the silver grade." Greha said, "And if time permits, I hope to refine the gold grade Mud Viper egg. But I'm not sure if that's possible before the first major disaster starts. Even otherwise, using the Empyrean incubator, I can refine myself." He continued, "It might take significantly longer than if I succeeded in these 11 months, but I have confidence in improving my pranic beast grade to gold eventually." "But, why a Mud Viper?" Inala asked, "That's what I'm wondering about. Other than that, your plans are more or less similar to mine. Individual strength doesn't work against the Boar King." Greha sighed, "If even Risha failed, I won't be foolish enough to claim I could be better. This past month, I could clearly feel how gifted he is towards combat. Therefore, I chose the only other method. Swarm tactics." He concluded. "It's the easiest to raise the number of Mud Vipers. They have the fastest maturity rate. And with my ovum, I can make them vastly more terrifying than a common Mud Viper. That's rather straightforward." Inala could guess Greha's thoughts. The 44th Empyrean tusk was a gold-grade pranic beast, one whose individual strength lay at the top of Sumatra. But even it was overwhelmed by a Mud Viper nest. Had it stumbled upon 2 mud viper nests, it would have been surely killed. For a young Empyrean tusk at its prime, at most 4 mud viper nests would be necessary to kill it. Therefore, as long as Greyha had enough of a swarm under his control, he could kill even the Boar King. That was his plan. That's why I revealed my secrets to you, Greyha. Inala smirked, I too am proceeding in the same route. That's why I'll become a Zinger Queen. Now, tell me. Greyha asked, how did you trust that I'll come to possess such secrets? It's simple, Inala grinned, remember when that Cthulhu gathered us? I do, Greyha nodded. Back then, weren't you the most confident among us all in claiming to be better than Risha? Inala grinned, you're green. Yes, I was confident. Greyha nodded, but it could have just been a boast. You see, Inala coughed awkwardly, in the negative review I left, I bashed his mom. So, when we met, the Cthulhu beat me to a pulp. That made me realize he's as emotional as a teenager. Therefore, I was observing him all along. When he gathered us all, his heads multiplied from 1 to 6. And each head faced one of us respectively. Inala said, for every statement we said, the respective head facing us reacted, even if all the heads spoke in unison. Since it could read our minds, that mild facial reaction indicated whether or not it believed our claims. He stared at Greyha and grinned, I clearly remember its expression at your boast. Even though it was subtle, it was an emotion of excitement. Chapter 40. Constructive and Destructive Greed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Visit my home daily. Greyha said as he held the refined mud viper tonic, come after dinner time. Sure, Inala nodded. By inviting him to his house, Greyha was exhibiting his level of trust. The two had allied now and intended to walk towards a common survival. Since they didn't need to fight for the cure, there wasn't any significant reason to be in conflict. Moreover, by allying, they could pool their resources and plan for a better future. Do you plan to reveal the true nature of the cure to the other reincarnates? Greyha paused just as he was about to open the door, turning around to stare at Inala. Heck no. Inala growled, if I say anything to them, there's a guaranteed chance they'll destroy the Zinger Queen's egg. Therefore, I intend to play dumb and act as if I'll drop out of the race. Blola and Yenda creep me the fuck out. Virala is fucking greedy. He most definitely plans to proceed in the same route as Risha. Inala continued in irritation, they're all snakes. And unlike me or you, they desire strength even if everyone else is killed in the process. Destructive greed, huh? Greyha nodded. He thought of his plan, followed by Inala's, both of us are incredibly greedy too. But our plans don't involve destroying others. The two of us fall under constructive greed. What do we do about them? Greyha asked, we need to do something to thwart their plans. There's also the problem with Ganala's lifespan. After she dies, our lives would become terrible. Ganala was the 44th Empyrean Tusk's name. Inala was now aware of it. He frowned as he pondered, in Sumatra Chronicles, after her death, only 20 remained alive in this settlement. They weren't accepted as refugees by the other settlements. Even though Empyrean Tusks moved as a herd, they were averse to having mammoth clansmen from other Empyrean Tusks live on them. That was because of one primary reason. A mammoth clansman born on the 44th Empyrean Tusk was considered part of its immune system. To the 43rd Empyrean Tusk, a mammoth clansman from the 44th settlement was a foreign bacterium, not exactly an enemy but not a friend either. It would be similar to the human body's immune system registering weak bacteria as a powerful enemy and launching a full-scale attack on it. The enemy would be dealt with so swiftly that the white blood cells wouldn't know what to do and hence turn up on the body's cells. This was what primarily caused rashes. A foreign mammoth clansman living on an Empyrean Tusk would cause it to develop a rash too. It would develop stress trying to ensure its gravitational fields didn't squash him by mistake. For an Empyrean Tusk's mind, that stress was dangerous. Because it would quickly accumulate and pass over the tipping point, causing the Empyrean tusk to enter an aggressive state. It would immediately attack the rest of the herd. Just one foreigner, if cooped up in a house like a prisoner, wasn't an issue. But if there were around a dozen, with each moving around like people of that settlement, then things became serious. 20 survivors from the 44th settlement were pretty much dangerous if invited into other settlements. It was because the Mammoth clan disliked taking care of someone that didn't contribute. But to contribute, these refugees would have to take up work, meaning they would move throughout the settlement, only adding to the Empyrean tusk stress. The reward was nothing, while the risks included the possible downfall of more than one Empyrean tusk. Due to that reason, those survivors had to run after the herd and live a life worse than dogs. Inala sighed. Once a Mammoth clansman reaches the body stage, they would require a lot of resources, most of which could only be produced by their Empyrean tusk. Without that, they wouldn't be able to cultivate. Forget cultivation, if the situation progressed for an extended duration, their bones would begin to turn brittle. But it wasn't the fragment disease. Their bodies were simply starting to collapse. That arc was messed up, Greha stated in worry. The survivors faced the second, third, and fourth minor crisis in that state. I remember having sleepless nights while reading that arc. The gore was ugly. I stopped reading it for 2 months. Inala trembled faintly, thinking that they would have to face it next. Only after the next arc started and I saw comments that things had recovered did I dare read that arc. The Mammoth clan's ugliness would be on full display. Greha shuddered at the thought. Eventually, Risha's parents returned with a baby Empyrean tusk. It accepted them as part of its immune system. Things barely recovered after that. I'm working on my goal to ensure I can prolong Inala's lifespan until the baby Empyrean tusk arrives, Inala said. Greha's eyes lit up. Right, the Zinger Queen's power. But, he frowned, you won't have a large enough window after becoming the Zinger Queen to save Ganala. Or rather, I don't think you'll make it on time. Which is why I'm allying with you. Inala said in seriousness, I'll support you with all my strength. And during the first major disaster, you'll become my bodyguard. In today's fair, all the reincarnates have gained a means of revenue. There aren't any significant opportunities after this for them to reveal themselves. Inala concluded, so, I fear all of them would be busy holed up in their houses, cultivating and preparing their schemes. We won't get any other opportunities to kill them. That's what you're saying, right? Greha nodded. The earliest opportunity is during our graduation. But that's an hour before the first major disaster starts. It's too risky to target them in that situation. Right, even if we target one reincarnate, we might also be injured in the process. Inala grunted, if that happens, we'll miss our opportunity. That risk is the reason all schemes will stop until the first major disaster starts. But, his eyes turned cold, once they succeed in their scheme, they'll start hunting everyone else. I get what you're saying, Greha nodded and opened the door, I'll be your bodyguard. To avoid living through that arc, I'll do my best to help you succeed. Same here, Inala nodded, I'll give my wholehearted cooperation for your success too. Greha closed the door and returned to his home. Inala looked around, feeling the silence of the place. It seems Ganala stopped flailing her tail. Inala left his home and sat on the ground, closer to the settlement's edge. He observed the vast darkness that stretched beyond, faintly illuminated by the majestic celestial bodies in the sky. Ganala, if you're able to hear me, gently slap your tail twice. He muttered after a while. Immediately in response, the 44th Empyrean tusk's tail gently slapped its butt twice, just as he had requested. It usually only slapped once, aloud, and that was to deter any pranic beast that crept towards it. As the Empyrean tusk moving last in the herd, it needed to be attentive about any enemies that might ambush the herd from behind. That was why it continued to make loud sounds using its tail. Upon hearing the two soft sounds, Inala laughed, faintly tearing up in happiness. Ah! I'm happy to have been reincarnated to this world. Thank you for tolerating my existence, Ganala. I'll definitely help you survive the first major disaster. After all, his face beamed as he stared at one of the celestial planets in the sky that faintly resembled Jupiter. I dreamed of living a long life in this world. Sumatra Chronicles is hype.